Welcome to another episode of our webinar series, A Day in the Life of. This evening, we are very excited to invite Dwayne Kutsia. He is a Linux systems engineer. Thank you, Dwayne, for taking some time to do this. We do appreciate it, especially on this slightly miserable Monday here in Cape Town.
Yeah, no sweat. It's tropical weather.
Tropical weather. I don't know about tropical. It feels a little bit too much like Europe at the moment, but I guess we just have to hold thumbs that on the 1st of September, Cape Town gets the message and remembers that it's spring day, hey?
Let's hold our thumbs for that.
Yeah. So I see we've got some people that have joined the webinar this evening. I just want to let you know there is a Q&A section on your screen. If you have any questions for Dwayne, you're more than welcome to pose the questions there. But let's get started, Dwayne. Tell us a little bit about your journey that led you to becoming a Linux systems engineer.
Okay, well, my career didn't start in tech. I actually started as a mechanic. But then after I realized that I wouldn't be able to really support the lifestyle that I wanted as a mechanic, then I sort of distanced myself away from that and went into managed services instead. And so I worked in managed services for a while, for about a year and a little bit. I got an internship overseas, also doing technical work in the United States. So I worked there for a year as well. And then when I came back, I started working for an ISP. Some might know them, Box Telecom. Not a nice job. Yeah, I don't ever envy anyone that works for them. And yeah, then between that time and now, I just worked for various ISPs, various managed services provider. I worked for a security company as well. I was the head of their IT for a while. And yeah, and now I'm back in the ISP space doing back-end systems for a mobile services operator.
Okay. So you obviously started in, one particular direction and went into another direction. Have you done any courses or any certification in order to become Linux certified, or maybe you could take us through that whole process?
So I did do a few certifications. It really started with ITE, with a special interest in advanced networking. I did think that back then I thought I wanted to be a network engineer at first, but then I sort of decided against that, and I also was given an opportunity to do the Linux thing instead. But yeah, I mean, in terms of certifications, I've got my ITE with a little bit of advanced networking, like Active Directory and Exchange servers, some Microsoft products. And then I'm also a certified MikroTik network associate. So my networking background is there a little bit too. And then I also have my LPIC 1. So that is the Linux Professional Institute Certification 1, which is the certification just above the essentials. So you get essentials, then you get LPIC 1, then you get LPIC 2, and then LPIC 3 branches off into various more specific topics.
Yeah. Okay, and thank you for the correction. I've been saying Linux, but I'm hearing now it's Linux. So I will say it right for the rest of this webinar series. Why Linux? Why not something else? What led you here?
So it's, a lot of it comes from the direction that Microsoft has been going in terms of them not respecting the privacy of the user. And if anyone knows who a gentleman by the name of Richard Stallman is, then they'll know exactly what I'm talking about. Richard Stallman has got some very funny views about some things, but I firmly subscribe to his view on supporting the privacy of the user and the freedom of the user. And so nowadays, I don't touch any software that isn't 100% free and open source. And so, and basically the one day I just put Windows down, and I never picked it up again, and the rest is history.
Okay. All right. So I spoke to you a little bit before we went onto the main stage, and I was sort of asking you all these random questions. I obviously have absolutely no experience or knowledge of your industry, but you mentioned that you are a back end engineer. Maybe we can talk a little bit about that, and you can tell me about the front end engineer version. Like, why do you do what you do and not the other one?
So the back end is more, it's more technical in terms of, well, I mean, I guess they're both equally technical. It's really depending on what you're interested in. So I always said if you're going to go into IT, then there are multiple different branches that you can go, but the main ones are basically systems and servers, or you can do development, or you can do networks. And those
Okay.
are like the sort of main branches, or at least that's how I always looked at it, as those being the three main ones. So I'm not a developer at all. I don't develop systems. The most coding I do is really scripting, and that's got more to do with automation than anything else.
Yeah.
Yeah, so what I do is I actually build systems and build the underlying infrastructure that web servers or MySQL servers or whatever else would sit on top of.
Yeah. Okay. All right. That's interesting. So I'd like to get into the whole what's a day like in your life. But before we do that, I just want to take a question quickly from an audience member. Lavalani would like to know if you can get your Linux certificate for free. Is this the thing?
You can study for it for free. All of the software and especially when it comes to software and when it comes to material, that is 100% free. The exam itself does cost money though. And if you're going to get it done through an institution, you can expect to pay anywhere between 2,500 and 3,000 Rand per exam. LPIC 1 has got 2 exams in order for you to pass. And so that could cost anywhere between 5,000 and 6,000 Rand in order for you to write both exams and get your LPIC. So you don't actually need essentials to start writing any LPIC exams. But Essentials is a good place to start if you've never worked in a Linux environment before.
Okay. All right. That's interesting. Lavalani, hopefully that was helpful for you. Dwayne, let's talk about the main theme for this webinar series. What's a day like in your life? What do you do, generally speaking, without getting into the technical end of everything?
So, so I get up in the morning and I check my emails and I check what my schedule is for the day. I take a look at my task board and see if there's anything that needs to happen for that particular day. I look at the monitoring and make sure that all of my services are up and running and all of my systems are behaving and nothing is broken. Yeah, and then I also have 2 juniors working underneath me, so I need to keep them busy as well. And then I have one line manager that I report to. I make sure that he's happy and that there's nothing that he wants me to do. But yeah, other than that, I just make sure that I keep things running as best as they can be, and I make things better and automate as much as I can so that my hands are free to do other things later on.
Okay.
And that's pretty much all. Yeah, I don't engage with clients at all. I'm strictly back end. I'm strictly just the systems engineer. I don't engage with any clientele.
Okay, so you said you're strictly back end, you don't engage with clients. Does that then, am I correct in assuming that front end engineers or developers would engage with clients?
Also, no. So the way my company works is we have specific departments that handle specific things. So what you're describing as front end is what the user will actually see. So like the web page itself, that's the front end. And so we have developers that take care of how things look and coding of the actual web page. But we also have a support department that engages directly with the client.
I see. Okay, cool. So, in your role as the systems engineer, you mentioned that there's a lot of maintaining systems involved in it. So, I'm curious from sort of like a work day perspective, does this translate or does this mean that you are often on call after hours or on weekends?
So yes, I am on call. Um, I'm on call every second weekend next to the person I report to, because I'm also still in training, in many ways. So I have to be on call every second weekend. But because we run such a well-oiled machine, the phone never rings. So I'm on call, but at the same time, I'm not really busy at all. I just make sure that everything runs. So I keep the monitoring there in the background, and if I glance over it, my work is basically done over the weekend.
Okay, all right. Well, that's nice. That's always pleasant. What would a crisis be in your environment, Dwayne? If you say it's a well-oiled machine that things don't go wrong, but what would be, without getting too technical, what consists as a crisis with the work that you do?
Well, because of the nature of my work, we support many forms of critical infrastructure. So, so be it water and sanitation, or be it electricity or metering systems, be it equipment that is used in the medical field, or vehicle tracking systems or anything like that. Any time that one of these solutions don't work properly, that can be constituted as a crisis. So when it starts affecting the client in a negative way, then obviously that is never good for business. And so we always try to make sure that services are running at all times and try to maintain our SLA as best we can.
Yeah. Okay. Let's backtrack this a little bit. I'm actually getting some questions about this now, but I was anticipating this. You mentioned the internship overseas. Maybe you can talk us through that whole experience a little bit.
So at that point in my career, I was very junior still. I was still, very much a newbie in the IT world, but I did have a little bit of skill behind my name. And the company that I was working for was dealing in uh, a youth soccer scheduling system. So they have like profiles for each player inside of the youth soccer world, and then you could schedule games and track your child's progress through their platform. And so I was one of the support engineers, and I was just very fortunate to have somebody offer me a position to go there, to do that kind of work. So yeah, I mean that's really the long and the short of it.
And where were you exactly overseas?
So I was based out of Jacksonville, Florida, but we got to travel around a little bit, because the business took us all over the United States. So I got to see Nevada. I went to Texas. I went to Georgia State. Got to see New York City. Yeah,
Okay. All right,
but
that sounds
mainly.
very exciting. Okay, so this company that you worked for that provided the internship, was it a American company that sort of headhunted you on this side, or was this the South African company that had opportunities in the States?
So it's an American company, and to call it headhunting would not really be fair. It was more like through a family friend that I was offered the position.
Okay. All right, just to stick with internships now, as I mentioned to you, our audience is predominantly students and graduates. Are there a lot of internships in your industry for students who are interested in pursuing a systems engineer career?
I can't actually speak to that because I've never pursued an internship in my particular line. I've never needed to, because I've always been, hired and like interviewed and hired based upon my skill set.
Yeah.
So I can't really say. I know that there are internships at certain companies, but if I were to start over, then I would work mainly on educating myself rather than pursuing an internship, so that I have some sort of skill by the time I sit down for an interview. But I mean,
Are there
that's just
No, fair enough. Are there any, from like your view, obviously, as our guest, aside from what you have studied to get to where you are now, is there anything more that you want to study or any courses you want to do that you think would help you become a more prominent Linux systems engineer?
absolutely.
Yeah.
So being a systems engineer is very multidisciplined and multifaceted. It's sort of like being it's like being in cybersecurity, 1 foot in and 1 foot out. So part of my work is also maintaining security infrastructure as well. It's making sure that there are no breaches, there are no vulnerabilities. I stay on top of current events. I make sure that CVEs, especially current CVEs, are patched and taken care of. Um, so, so in terms of what I would like to study going forward, obviously my LPIC 2 is next on my radar. Just trying to solidify my role as a Linux systems engineer. But then, of course, there are additional courses like taking AWS, for example, and making sure that I'm proficient in AWS and all of its ins and outs. And there are various security certifications as well, which really take you in depth into what the possibilities are when it comes to security vulnerabilities and making sure that those get that you aren't at risk to anything like that. So yeah, those are basically what's next on my plate.
Okay. And from a career projection perspective, the more courses you do, where could you end up? In what role?
Well, there are multiple roles that I could end up in. Just speaking to what I've already mentioned, so I could be a senior systems engineer. That's one role, and then also there are various roles inside of the security department as well, which is sort of where I'm heading. I'd like to head up, more of the security infrastructure and work hand in hand with the team that we already have dealing with our security stuff. So yeah, and then there are regional managers as well who manage entire regions, since we work multinational as well. We're not just here in South Africa.
Yeah.
So yeah, so there are many possibilities for me at this point.
Okay. All right. That's very exciting. So we don't have a lot of time left, Dwayne. But I would love your input when it comes to skills that you think are important for young students and graduates who are interested in pursuing a similar career to you. Like, what advice would you give them from a skills and just generally?
Well, I mean, in order for people to pursue a career like mine, they obviously need to know Linux very well, and they need to know
Yeah.
all of the ins and outs and make sure that you know every little bit of the system and know how to manipulate systems. It's not enough to just work on it from the day to day and think you are proficient. When it comes to troubleshooting, for example, there are lots of different things that could go wrong, and to know how to diagnose these things is very important. So, Linux is the backbone of the internet, as many may know. And so the more you know about it, the more you empower yourself ultimately. Yeah. So knowing your tool set well and knowing the system well is important. Um, I think the next bit of advice I'd give is to throw all of your proprietary software away. Don't use any proprietary software at all. If you can at all get away from proprietary software, then do it. And yeah, I mean, there's one or two other things I can speak to, but I don't want to take up too much of your time if we have some.
That's not a problem. I am curious though, from a soft skill perspective, do you think there are any skills that would be beneficial in your industry? attention to detail. I'm assuming communication and people skills aren't necessarily important if you're behind the screen significantly.
Well, I mean, attention to detail is naturally important. You need to be able to look at a body of information and pick out, where the differences are, and if something stands out to you, you need to be able to see that in sort of a moment's glance. You can't really spend hours and hours looking for, problems that are sort of staring you right in the face. And then soft skills like being good with people, I'd say is actually important, because at some point when you get to my sort of level, then you're going to have people working underneath you, and you're going to need to teach these people things.
Yeah.
And so being good with people and being a good mentor is, I'd say, is also important. That's also something that I needed to develop. Yeah. So these kinds of things, I would say they do have their value.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, but,
well, Dwayne, yeah.
So,
first?
So you really need to start small, and don't let Linux intimidate you, because I know, when all of the work that you do is through the command line, people immediately get intimidated. But that is just, it's very much external. It's nothing to be afraid of, and it's like anything in life. The more you practice it, the better you become, and slow and steady and consistent increments is what will ultimately develop your skill set and make you better.
Yeah.
And that's what ultimately wins the race,
Yeah, absolutely. Don't be impatient. Do what you need to do it right, learn it properly, and you'll get to where you need to go.
Yeah. One of the key aspects, I think, is also to stay curious. If you're presented with a problem, then don't just accept that as what it is. Sometimes you need to really pick something apart in order to know where this problem comes from and know all of its aspects in order to be able to solve it. Yeah.
Okay, I like that. That's great advice. Attention to detail, curiosity. These are skills that we can use in life in general, but definitely for those of us in the audience who are interested in pursuing a similar career. We are out of time, Dwayne, so I just want to say thank you for taking your time doing this. I know there was a little bit of hand forcing from my side, so I do appreciate this. And have a great evening.
Appreciate that. Thanks, Priya.
All righty. Bye.
Cheers.